and welcome to the One in the Many Videocast, Episode 2. My name is Rob Guzman. If you've been here before, welcome back. If you're new and have never seen one of my videos, let me briefly tell you what I'm about. So every week, I go through the news headlines and distill high-level principles that unite them together. Hence the name, One in the Many. This week, I want to cover two issues, one of which is a brand new issue that I haven't discussed yet, and the other is a holdover, in a way, from last week's episode, particularly when we talked about big tech and the attacks from both Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders. The first issue I want to start with, though, is the new issue, which is Jim Carrey's comments on... Excuse me, I've got a cold, so bear with me if I cough a lot. Won't stop me from doing this. Jim Carrey made an appearance on the Bill Maher program last week, where he basically argued that socialism isn't a dirty word and that Democrats should say yes to it. They should say yes to the label, yes to the term, and embrace it. He went on to add that he was a Canadian citizen growing up. He never had to wait for any doctor appointments. His mother never had to pay for any prescriptions, and it was wonderful. It was a great time. Now, I wouldn't normally waste my time talking about comments from a washed-up 90s comedian. I mean, I thought Jim Carrey was kind of funny when I was a kid, but what he really does is just make funny faces. He's not that deep of an actor. He's kind of late in his career now. He's past his prime, and he does all kinds of weird things, like you see these bizarre paintings on Twitter that he puts up there. I checked out a few of those. I have to say that if you look at those for yourself, you'll ask yourself, what kind of soul would produce such work? But regardless of what I think about Jim Carrey personally, I think his comments do raise an important issue that needs to be discussed. And I'd like to tackle it from a principled perspective and bring a few other facts to bear on the issue. So the first thing I want to talk about is this issue of healthcare in Canada. I don't want to spend too much time on it, but I want to kind of address some of the comments he made just point by point. So the first thing he said was that he never had to pay for a prescription. His mother could just go in and pick it up, and it was great. Well, then I have to ask, who did pay it? Because medicine doesn't fall. It's not manna. It doesn't fall like manna from heaven. It's not a gift from God. It's produced by individual people, by individual manufacturers, drug manufacturers, and scientists. So the question is, who paid for it? Well, the answer is Jim Carrey did, and his mom, and every other taxpayer in the country. Canada has a single-payer healthcare system that costs them about 25% of their total tax revenue every year. That's not a one-and-done cost. That's an ongoing 25% of their whole tax burden. That's provincial and federal, from what I understand, for tax-subsidized healthcare. It's unbelievably expensive. And what does this have to say about somebody like Jim Carrey, who says, well, isn't it great? You could just be a ward of the state. You could just be a parasite and have someone else pay for your prescription. Who wants that? What moral person wants to live at somebody else's expense? Even if they're downtrodden, even if they don't make a lot of money, you don't want to be that kind of person. I mean, the immigrants that came to this country in the early part of the 20th century were poor, but a lot of them worked their way out of it. They became successful by starting businesses. So why would you want to be a parasite? Why would you want to be a ward? So that's point one. Point two, on wait times. He says that he never had to wait for any doctors or to see anybody. Well, he's lucky. He hasn't been severely ill then, because the way that socialized medicine works in countries like Canada, Great Britain, France, is that those people who have very slight illnesses or just need checkups don't wait very long. But for people who have severe illness or severe treatment requirements like surgery, any need for an MRI machine, we're talking wait times measured in weeks and months, not days. Many people end up coming to the United States to get an MRI or a CAT scan or a surgery that they weren't able to get in Canada in a timely fashion. Their doctors told them, if you wait, you're likely to die. This is a common occurrence in Canada. It happens in Great Britain as well. And this is borne out in the survivor statistics. If you look at the statistics for diseases like cancer, heart disease, the United States outpaces all these socialized medicine countries. So their only sticking point is the cost, and even that isn't valid because it's borne by all the taxpayers. It's culled at the point of a gun. It's people living off of other people. So I don't want to talk too much longer in this video about healthcare, but I will say that I'll dedicate a future video to it. Now, I want to just talk really briefly, though, at least, about this issue of socialism and how Democrats have to say yes to it. Well, socialism has become very popular with today's youth. That much is clear. Polls show that something like 45% of people who are aged 18 to 35 view socialism favorably, compared to 49% who view capitalism favorably. Meanwhile, you have candidates like Bernie Sanders, who was a very popular candidate in the 2016 election among younger voters, Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez here in New York, who won a House seat, billing herself as Democratic Socialist, and even more recently here in Brooklyn, a woman named Julia Salazar won state senate, also a self-described social democrat. Well, I have to say 1% of people endorsing socialism is way too high, and I'm going to explain exactly why. The first thing to do is to note what socialism is. Socialism is the political system where the government owns the means of production. Government under socialism controls all the factories, all the businesses, all the property. Under socialism, there is no such thing as private property. Now, some would say this isn't socialism, it's communism. Socialism is far more benign, and it just involves an economic system. But that's not true. Karl Marx, who's essentially the granddaddy of socialism and communism, used these two terms interchangeably, and for the most part, he referred to communism as sort of a mythical system where people go through a socialistic reconditioning process. What does that mean? Well, it means that according to Marx, people are greedy. They want more than they should. They don't want to work as hard as they could. So what do we need to do? Well, we need to recondition them. We have to make them into a new ideal man who will work in such a way that they work each according to their ability and each according to their need. Marx's goal was to create a government where individuals would work as hard as they could, as their body could take, up to the very point of their skill, and then they would only take from it what they needed, whatever that means. And it's usually decided by a government bureaucrat or a government commissar, of course. Now, we know this never happened. No such reconditioning occurred. It's actually not possible to happen because human nature doesn't change in that way. We are not automatons with no consciousness and no ideas, and we can be reconditioned by the means of production around us. This is not how human nature operates. Instead, what happens is you have a small aristocratic elite who govern and rule over everyone else in the society. And anybody who is intractable, anybody who isn't reconditioned properly, ends up getting murdered, purged. This is in keeping with the theory of Marxism, and it explains the mass death in the 20th century due to socialism. We're talking 100 million people murdered, starved by incompetent and evil regimes that were preaching Marx's message. Now, I'll say this. Every individual human is by nature an individual. There is no collective brain. There is no collective consciousness. It doesn't exist. It's a fantasy. The Borg are not a documentary film. The Star Trek episodes with the Borg, that's not a documentary film. That's not even a possibility. Those are fictional characters. Humans are individuals. They have their own minds, their own needs, their own values. And you have to treat them as individuals or you will have mass death. So we don't live in a socialist country. Canada's not a socialist country. Neither are the Scandinavian countries. Neither is Britain. Neither is France. But we don't live in a capitalist country either, really. So capitalism, compared to socialism, is a system where all property is private. It's privately owned. Okay? The government exists to protect individual rights, and that's it. It doesn't redistribute wealth. It doesn't try to socially engineer people. That's all it does, is protect individual rights. America in the 19th century was probably the closest thing to capitalism this world has ever seen, and that explains the huge growth and prosperity this country endured. Today, we're kind of working off of the momentum of those countries of that time. We're running on fumes because what we do live under today is a mixed economy. A mixed economy is a system where you have some elements of capitalism and freedom and some elements of socialism. This is true of all those European countries that people like to refer to as well. They're also mixed economies, but they have a different mixture than the United States does. For example, in the Netherlands, income taxes are generally higher and corporate taxes are generally fairly high, but it's much easier to start a business. They don't have as many regulations and rules for individuals who want to start a company. Meanwhile, in the United States, we have the opposite problem. Lots of regulations, lots of business impediments, but fairly low taxes compared to those Scandinavian countries. So it's just a different mixture. It's not socialism and capitalism, it's one variation of a mixed economy versus another variation of a mixed economy. So what I will say, though, is that if we put programs forward like single-payer healthcare, we have universal public education, all these things, you're going to have a system that moves closer to the socialist end of the spectrum. That's really what you should think of it as. It's essentially a spectrum with freedom over here and authoritarianism, totalitarianism over here. And we reside somewhere in the middle, and we're moving in one direction or the other at any given time because mixtures are radioactive. They aren't stable, they don't last long. People go for the more consistent approach. That's why you see in this country this various fluctuations between freedom and controls, though there have been a staggering amount of controls put in, even under people like Republicans who claim to be pro-free market and pro-business. So it's not that we're living under socialism now, and you shouldn't want it because it's a tyrannical and evil system. So I just want to close on this point and say that, millennials who think that taxing the rich a bit more or put more regulations on business is socialism, they're wrong. It's not socialism. To somebody like Jim Carrey, who made his fortune in a basically mixed economy with a lot of capitalism injected, particularly in the movie industry where he worked, I ask, imagine what it would be like if the government decided that entertainment was a need, just like health care is. Everyone needs it. So you're not going to keep it from people. It should be a right, right? Well, okay, now it's a right. So what happens? The government takes over everything. They take over all the screenwriters guilds. They take over all the major studios. They hire every actor and actress. They hold auditions. They deal with the salary caps. They decide what movies get made and for whom. Are they going to be rom-coms? Are they going to be dramas? Are they going to be horror? Are they going to be action? Who can say? A free market doesn't have this problem because if I really want to see a drama film, I can buy a movie ticket to go see a drama film. I can fund a studio that puts out drama films. I can hire actors if I have a good idea for a horror film. A horror film about socialism, maybe. Starring Jim Carrey, right? And maybe Cortez is an extra because, she has that expensive attire. I don't know if you saw that, but she was wearing these really expensive garments during a photo shoot, and I guess they ran out of military fatigues, right? Anyway, so, in such a system where you've got acting being totally taken over by the government, what would happen to somebody like Jim Carrey, who basically acted in all the movies he wanted to act? I mean, he was a comedian. He was a comic actor. What if it wasn't the case the government thought that, people need comedies and they need more action movies or romantic comedies or romantic movies? They'd say, well, Jim, you want to make that movie The Mask? What do you mean you want to make that movie The Mask? No one else wants to do it. It's not in the public interest. Sorry, I guess if you can't qualify for a drama, you're unemployable. You should try another industry. Too bad. I guess the public has its final say, right? Well, that's a horrible system. If you apply it to any other industry, you'll see that controls destroy that industry. Every industry it's applied to. Now, final word on this. I want you to compare in your life the state of healthcare, the state of public education, the public transportation system in your city or state. Compare those government-run entities, the DMV, the post office, right? Compare all that with things that are fairly unregulated like tech. Every year, better phones come out, better computers, better laptops, better software. That's largely unregulated. If the government were regulating that, those would go out the window too, and you'd see less progress in those fields. So Jim Carrey says Democrats need to say yes to socialism. I say that everyone needs to say no to Jim Carrey. Hi, Rob here. Did you like what you saw? If you're really interested and want to see more, click the link below and check out my YouTube channel to see full episodes of the One in the Many videocast. Thanks. Hope to see you later. Bye.